I want to take us on a mathematical excursion. So I will urge my colleagues to please take their paper and biro and follow this argument so that we'll look deeper into this. And then when we are coming out, we'll come out with a
Minority leaders say you should take your paper and biro, that we are doing a mathematical excursion.
Yes, sir.
Chairman works, we are on a mathematical excursion.
So
we are doing it with our pen and paper.
At the end of the day, we'll come out with something that will not lead us into
we are doing
problem.
mathematical excursion with pen and paper.
Yes, sir. Let me take an example of a practical election, and you have YV as one of the candidates, Professor Julius as one of the candidates, Kumo as another candidate, different political parties, but candidates. Jaha and our brother Maki, 5 of them contesting. So I take them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the first candidate scored 25. So I urge that you take 25 down because you're going to do subtraction. And the second candidate scored 22. Third candidate scored 18 votes. Fourth, 10. And the fifth, 5 votes. Now, the third candidate, who is Kumo, did overvoting or sponsored overvoting by 20 votes.
What is the accredited number of voters?
Why are you limiting it to Chief Whip? No. Why are you calling Kumo? Even though he says he's a malam, you are still indicting him.
Vote again now.
You know what malam means? This is a righteous man. Why are you imputing to him that he's doing overvoting? He sponsored overvoting. Well, it's just an example. It's not you. It's not you in person.
Thank you, sir. Take that the third candidate now sponsored overvoting by 20 votes, with an accredited figure of 78 in all, if you take their first initial real figures. Now, if he sponsored 20 votes added to his own, he now gets 28 instead of 18 and becomes the winner, while ordinarily he was the second runner-up. Now, if you add that 20, his total votes becomes 28, and he's now the winner. This law, the amendment is saying that we should now deduct across board that excess 20 votes from all the political parties. Now, if we deduct across board the 20 votes, we are deducting 4 votes from each person. So deduct 4 from each person, his 28 becomes 24. He still wins. So in essence, there is something we still need to look at, to tweak a little bit for us to get it right, because somebody can still commit this crime of overvoting, and by the amendment we are making, he will still be declared the winner, depending on the margin of overvoting. So, whilst I support the amendment, because it is tended towards curing a lacuna in the present law, but I will urge that as we go to public hearing, to committee stage, that these lacuna should be looked at critically, and then a proper solution be produced for us to cure it and cure it permanently. Thank you.
I think there's a general consensus that we need.
I see no reason why in democracy, the more the merrier. I see no reason why, for instance, in Bende, less than 50 delegates will decide the fate of who is going to represent them for the next 4 years in a political party. Especially in some even political parties, it's only 3 delegates per ward. In other words, a constituency with 10 electoral wards have 30 delegates to decide the fate of more than 200 or 300,000 people in that political party. So the issue of defining clearly those that can participate in the process of selecting or electing or picking a candidate for a political party is very, very critical to involve statutory delegates, particularly sitting members of the National Assembly and sitting members of the State Houses of Assembly, former members of State Assembly and former members of National Assembly. At least let them participate. Secondly, executive members of a political party should equally participate so that there will be democratically elected candidate for a political party. But by the time you have less than 30 to decide who is coming here to represent 300 or 400,000 people is where you have issue. Sometimes if care is not taken, somebody that has a very large pocket can buy them over and become a candidate and come here and do the wrong thing because the process was faulty. So, Mr. Speaker, honorable members, we should be specific on the indirect primaries of political parties as earlier recommended by this amendment. This is my position. Thank you.
I consciously and deliberately say Malam. Malam with capital M. Member representing Akko Federal Constituency, I'm from Gombe State. Mr. Speaker, as students of politics, this one bill that needs the support of all of us. Reason being that where we are unable to get the foundation, we may probably not get it correct. Putting our electoral laws in the proper perspective to be in tandem with the global practice is what may likely save this country and put us on the right track. In the 9th Assembly, when we are amending the Electoral Act, like he rightly mentioned, we mistakenly overlook and delete the provisions that technically take of all of us out of participation in the primaries as statutory delegates. I think if this bill is supported by all of us, God's willing will enhance and strengthen the electoral process, which by the time when we have the electoral process correct, it will give birth to a democratically elected government that will be more focused because the basis and the foundation of that particular government is very, very fortified. I plead with our colleagues to please support this bill as it is a God-fearing bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Whip.
And the deletion of section 51, subsection 3, subsection 4, and section 84, subsection 8. Section 51 of the Act is amended by deleting the existing subsection 2 and inserting a new section 2 after subsection 1 as follows. Where the number of votes cast at an election in any polling unit exceeds the number of accredited voters in that polling unit, the presiding officer shall deduct the number of excess votes across all political parties in that polling unit, and the presiding officer shall be prosecuted in accordance with the provisions of Section 145 of this Act, and if found guilty, shall be sentenced to a period of 6 months imprisonment or a fine of 2 million, or both. So, Speaker, honorable colleagues, if above amendment is accepted, then there will be no basis for Section 51, subsection 3, and 51(4), and therefore should be completely deleted from the Act. As it stands, the provisions of Section 51, subsection 2, 3, and 4 seems to deliberately target legitimate winners of elections instead of criminally minded individuals who connive with custodians of electoral materials to cancel votes. Even if it is presumed that the individuals or individual who added the votes are not known, certainly the winner of the election in that particular unit or his agents cannot be party to a deliberate act that would invalidate their votes. So, Speaker, honorable colleagues, most of the times, candidates target strongholds of their opponents, leveraging on the provision of this section to add 1 or 2 votes or more to discredit the outcomes of the elections in those polling units, to create disadvantage for the advantage for the losers, thus deducting 1 or 2 votes from the votes of all candidates across the political parties will not dramatically change the outcome of those electoral contests. Equally important, Mr. Speaker, is the need to punish the presiding officers who allow themselves to be used to perpetrate fraud and injustice. As custodians of electoral materials, this clause is needed for the purpose of deterrence. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, Section 84 of the Principal Act is amended by deleting the existing subsection 8 and inserting a new section 8 after subsection 7 as follows. A political party that adopts the system of indirect primaries for the choice of its candidates shall clearly outline in its constitution and rules the procedure for the democratic election of delegates to vote at the convention, congress, or meeting, in addition to statutory delegates already prescribed in the constitution of the political party. Unquote. Above provision has always been part of the Electoral Act, in line with the provision of the constitution of all political parties in Nigeria, where statutory delegates are allowed to participate in primary elections to produce new leaders because of their tremendous experience. However, this very important section of the Electoral Act was mistakenly taken off the Act when it was last amended in 2022 by the 9th Assembly, hence the need for its reinstatement. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, I urge you to support this amendment. I thank you very much.
Flatter for bringing this amendment, and to urge my respected colleagues to support this amendment and pass it with the speed of light, because it will strengthen our democratic processes and procedure. Mr. Speaker, respected colleagues, I think this is very apt. And I was just sharing with my brother, Honorable Faleke and Babajime, brothers and Babajime Benson, how I escaped the antics of my opposition. This particular provision is not only harmful, but it can be used by many in terms of those who are political enemies. And today, even though for this moment I'm revealing, they don't know, because they have planned mischief against me using the independent electoral members who are working in tandem with them to now have additional votes into my own ballot boxes. But through the guidance of God, I said through the guidance of God, all my strong areas and strongholds, I made sure about 15 to 20% go for accreditation without voting. So they are concerned after the declaration, how did we escape this particular Electoral Act provision? And I want to believe that we have to do the cure. And Mr. Speaker, respectfully, not only on that one, the procedure, what really happened, I think out of mischief, some people excluded us. But the Electoral Act at that time did not exclude National Assembly members, but they termed it as unambiguous. And that's why, and that's why we need now to cure this one, so that it will be explicitly clear as to procedure and on conducting primaries. I think nowhere in this world you will have National Assembly members out of the delegation of their own party. It's never done anywhere in any democratic dispensation. And that's why I support, and I urge our colleagues to support. We still need to go further, sir. The judgment that was given, I did mention in Kano, is something else that should be of concern, where the Supreme Court ruled that so long you have ballot papers, stamp and sign, you stamp and even ballot papers and owned by the electoral agency, it has been counted. That is one very serious judgment against democratic dispensation, and anybody who mean well for democracy will know which that, because you are opening room for electoral malpractices. Thank you very much, Honorable Latta. We'll go again, we'll work in progress. And I want to urge my colleague to support this amendment and pass it, like I did mention, in the language of my brother, Honorable Minority Leader, with speed of light. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Honorable, with a little bit of a divergent view on the position canvassed in the lead debate by my senior colleague. While agreeing with the mischief that he intends to cure with this bill, that is preventing a case where people deliberately orchestrate overvoting in order to put fellow contestants at a disadvantage. Mr. Speaker, I'm worried at the provision or the proposition of asking or making a provision that the presiding officer be made to face criminal liability for cases of overvoting. And I'm saying this, Mr. Speaker, because it is not in all instances that overvoting as a result of the collusion of the presiding officer, and I stand to be corrected. I've had cases where at the period of accreditation, because of the malfunctioning of the accreditation machine, cases of overvoting results as a result of that, occur as a result of that. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the section which my senior colleague proposed, it gives the presiding officer the power to cure the problem in one instance, to say that he could go ahead and deduct the numbers of votes cast above accreditation from across all political parties. At the same time, prescribing that the presiding officer should be criminally liable for that same act. I want to think that if this proposition passes, Mr. Speaker, we'll be putting our young Nigerians who volunteer to act as presiding officers at unnecessary risk of
I was thinking that the purposive intention of the promoter of this amendment is to the effect that, granted that the provision of the law entitles the presiding officer to balance the votes in view of the accredited voters, where he fails to do so and proceed to enter a result that is obviously outside the accredited voters, he should be penalized. I think that is the purposive intention of the promoter of this amendment, unless you saw it differently.
Mr. Speaker, I see it differently because we have to interpret it strictly in accordance with the words used. The proposition, Mr. Speaker, is that he shall deduct the number of votes, of excess votes across all political parties in that political union, and the presiding officer shall be prosecuted. In other words,
why don't we remove the conjunctive and replace it with or?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think this is the level where we discuss the general principles of the bill, if I'm properly guided. We are discussing the general purpose of the bill. And I think that this leg, like I said, will put these presiding officers at unnecessary risk of prosecution, even when the results of that act may not necessarily be as a result of their own negligence or collusion.
So, are you saying we should remove any punitive measure completely?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I am saying that I do not think this provision is actually necessary in the first instance. I agree with the position that, you see, Mr. Speaker, I think there's one thing we are running away from in this country. And we have said it severally, even at previous attempt to amend the Electoral Act. Unless we fully digitalize our electoral process by accepting e-voting, you can hardly be able to avoid situations like this happening as a result of manual or human error. And as long as those processes are still as crude as they are, I think it will be very wrong for us to seek to criminalize somebody unless there is an indication that that is as a result of the person's negligence or collusion with certain elements to occasion the overvoting. That's my position, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Accredited. And that is the core function of a presiding officer. So if you have accredited number of voters 10, and the result received is reading 12, you are bound to cross-check with the accredited voters register, which says 10. And if 12 is coming in, you question, you query the extra 2. I think this law is trying to say where you ignore it and move ahead to enter 12, whereas the accreditation is 10, you should be punished. That is to deter people from, giving us frivolous results. Because what happened is that some presiding officers are energized to just write the result. You just write it, whether or not it is in conformity with the voters register and the accredited voter. You just write it. We'll defend it later on. You just have amounted. So if the presiding officers now know that there are consequences against them as a person occupying that position, as at when the result was collated, they will be deterred from doing garbage in, garbage out without cross-checking. But I want more people to look into this, and then Minority Leader, you want to say something? But before you, Minority Leader, let me hear from Maki. Honorable Maki. Honorable Maki.
I try to draw our attention.
We are announcing ad hoc committee membership at the end of the sitting, please.
Since the bill is at second reading, it will go to public hearing. So from there, when we come to the committee of the whole, we'll do all the needful and see that this amendment has get the light of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Jaha.
Ozokwe Peter Efani. I represent the good people of Newi North, Newi South, and the Okusigo constituency. I rise this afternoon to talk on this amendment and in support of it. Have we thought that accreditation and voting, they go simultaneously? How can a presiding officer, after accreditation, give you ballot paper, and at the end of the day, you have more result than what was voted for? Is it real? No. You are not doing accreditation and come back to vote. As you have been doing the accreditation, you are giving ballot paper to go and vote. So why must the result be different from what you are having physically? You consult a machine and see why the disparity in figures, and you correct it there in the presence of all political parties. There will be agreement. You feed in the result and announce it there. So I don't see why this amendment will not fly. Let us leave the amendment to fly. At least when we are working, we see what we are working for.
Okay. Thank you very much. Finally, Honorable Saddam Bamidele is in support of it and give ideas on what should be deleted, amended to tidy it up. The technical section on this bill is going to look into all this area, and also the mathematical excursion by the Minority Leader has also highlighted very key issues to be considered. I am sure that when this bill is allowed to migrate to the next level, some of these crossing of T's and dotting of I's will not be a challenge, since the Parliament is in support that this bill should progress. So I ask the question, those in support of this motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.